YouTube fan community, Dell Vikings fans, random people on the internet. My name is Giggens, and we're here today to talk about the Dell Vikings. Come go with the Dell Vikings, an album I never thought I'd hold in my entire life because you do not see albums by the Dell Vikings. It just doesn't come up. What I found really fascinating about this as well, because I like contextualizing things and finding things written on records. Someone wrote April 30th, April 30th, 1958, up there. It just brings you back. Like someone in the 50s bought this record. Pretty darn cool. The story of how this record came to be is fascinating. And I haven't done my homework to see if people have talked about this on YouTube yet, but if I'm the first, here you go. In 1957, the Dell Vikings left their current label, Phoebe, which was out of Pittsburgh, and moved on to Mercury Records, which kind of created two versions of the Dell Vikings. Here's where it gets weird. Crip Johnson was still tied to Phoebe Records, whereas the rest of the group signed on with Mercury. So because of that, contracts basically said, well, Phoebe kind of owns the Dell Vikings, but Mercury's like, well, we kind of own them too. So they kept both names, except the group with Crip had two L's in their name, which is the original Dell Vikings, while the Dell Vikings that we know and love moved to Mercury kept their spelling the same. The group with Crip in the band put out a song called I'm Spinning. So this was Dell with two L's, while the original quote unquote Dell Vikings put out a song called Cool Shake under the Mercury label with the standard spelling. While all this craziness is happening, some of their early a cappella demos got bought up by this brand, this label, Luniverse. And if you look at the top, it says LP 1000, meaning this was their first album. This was an up and coming record label that was like, ooh, the Dell Vikings are hot right now, and they discovered these early unreleased a cappella tracks and said, okay, let's put music underneath them and make them sound like pop songs. That's exactly what they did. Here's where it gets even crazier. Legal complications came up because of that, Dedoy, and the record was pulled off the shelves shortly after its July 1957 release. So, it's pretty cool seeing April 30th, 1958 on here because it's possible whatever store this was in, maybe it sat there for a while, or someone bought it and gave someone a present, gave this as a present or something and wrote the date on there. But long story short, it's kind of incredible that this album exists, and it's also kind of incredible that we're able to find them because they got pulled so quickly. This is a hard to find record. According to Discogs, which isn't necessarily the Bible of vinyl collecting, it shows that it's pretty rare. I found this at a Goodwill for 50 cents. I was digging through one day, and I was like, the Dell Vikings? You do not... I've been doing this for a long time. This is the first Dell Vikings album I have ever seen. Their 45s? Yeah, they pop up. This album? Not gonna happen too often, but it opens up with a track called Hey Senorita. Classic saxophone led track, tinkling pianos, good percussive blocks in the background. Works really well. You would have never known that the record label added music to it. You would have just assumed this was part of the experience. They did a great job combining them too, but the vocals end abruptly at the end. Kind of a weird, like, they didn't fade it out fast enough. Somewhere Over the Rainbow is a really, really nice version of this song. Just wonderful vocals. Really heartfelt, really honest, very smooth, and the music is gentle to accompany that. And it's also very unobtrusive. Like, it's just kind of there to let the vocals do their thing on top. I love the build up at the end. Just a really nice track. Come Go With Me is not the classic version we all know and love. This is an early version where they're still working out the kinks. It's pretty close to the released version, but there's obvious differences musically and vocally that when you heard it, you'd be like, oh, that sounds a little off, But it's still cool nonetheless. Like, historically speaking, it's pretty awesome to hear. And then Heaven and Paradise has really great bass parts. It's got that prom night feel, tapping piano, brushes in the drums. Just a nice classic vocal performance. Really romantic kind of sounding song. Side B opens up with How Can I Find True Love? A slow build-up vocally. It def takes its time. Long, drawn-out vocals. This is definitely like if you're a vocalist, this is one of those songs you try to do to like kind of prove your strength with vocally. I said the word vocal like 100 times in the last minute. You're welcome. The track Yours comes up next, and the tempo is picked up here. Great bass lead vocal. Sweet song about happily finding your someone, and knowing that your heart is cared for. Knowing that you're yours. No, they're yours. I'll remember in the still of the night. Yeah, that's still of the night. A really great take on this doo-wop classic. Definitely their own kind of take on it. I would say it's sort of close to the original, but just enough differences to make it kind of fun because it's their version of it. And then White Cliffs of Dover is the last track on here. Up tempo, kind of standard 50s doo-wop kind of fare. Still cool nonetheless. Here's the back cover. Very simple, very plain. Just says the Dell Vikings. To finish my story from earlier, so it gets crazier. So you had two competing Dell Vikings. You had the original spelling Dell Vikings, which were the new ones on the Mercury label, and the original group had two L's on the Phoebe Records label. Eventually, both of those things kind of crumbled apart. They got back together again in some shape or form or another under the original name with one L, and they survived basically until the mid 60s when the hits just kind of dried up and they broke up after that. Occasionally getting back together again for reunion shows and stuff. But as far as like a working unit that was like always going at it, they had about a good 7 or 8 years there, but till 1965 or so. But this album, it's special because I know how obscure it is, and to find it in such nice shape was also kind of far out. Let me show you what the record looks like. The record's in really nice shape. Bright yellow Luniverse Records label. Which almost doesn't really seem of its time. It looks too simple to be from the 50s, because 50s record labels are always a little bit more overwhelming, I suppose. It's just kind of flashy. But yeah, as a document of unreleased tracks kind of smashed on top of music, a la Simon and Garfunkel, if you will, it works. It works. It sounds good. I can imagine people just playing this on their hi-fi system in high school in the 50s or early 60s and just vibing along with it. It's cool. So yeah, I'd probably give this record maybe a 6 or 7 out of 10. It's not my favorite thing, but it's historically important and impressive enough with its story just to keep me coming back being like, oh, how do they do that? How do they do that? And that's interesting. So in that respect, it's really, really cool. So I go with 7 out of 10. But let me know, my fingers are covering the jacket the whole time. Let me know if you've heard this record before or if you have one. If you do have one, hang on to it. It's a collector's item at this point. So yeah, that's it. My name is Giggens. This has been the Dell Vikings. Come go with the Dell Vikings. 7 out of 10. Let me know what you guys think of it as well. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care of yourselves. See ya.